Good evening and welcome to the November Foxtrot podcast. You're joined this evening by me currently. Andy is basically very ill, and I believe Lance might be joining us, but we will wait and see how that goes. I apologise for the lack of audio. Unfortunately, when it's just me and my Todd at the start, we all know that ends up in incredibly awkward situations. Hopefully, I don't have a female voice this week. That's always a little bit of a challenge. But we are joined in the virtual studio audience by Kenny Rebel, Marky Mark, Pony Tony. Hi, welcome in. Basically, we're going to be continuing our discussions on how to improve MilSim on the basis of simulation. How much more sim can we make MilSim? So we're going to kind of crack on. Hopefully, it might just be a lot of me chatting to you guys, but if you want to chip anything in, then please do feel free to do so. Put a little cue at the beginning. It just helps me keep track, especially when it's just me on my Todd. One thing we will say is that if you have been on any of the social media on Facebook this week, you will likely have seen the Bryn debacle that has been happening. Big shout out to Bryn for, I didn't even see fully what happened, but apparently he got absolutely lambasted by the community and then decided to just go with the banter. So fair play to him. Well done. Hi, James. Welcome to the Mike show, as it is at the moment. Right, so basically, we are chatting about how to make sim more sim. This is a continuation of episode 201. So if you have no idea what I'm talking about, then please feel free to jump back and review the previous episode. We're going to kick it off with talking about enforced sleep and rest cycles for multi-day events. So if you have ever been to a MilSim, you will likely have suffered some element of sleep deprivation. The events that happen to occur over a longer period, such as your 24 hours or your 48 hours events, there are going to be periods where you need to get your head down. Now, these could be quite challenging, especially when you have large teams. You have people that are voluntarily there as opposed to just, having a go at, being a soldier or anything like that. So yeah, with any kind of voluntary organization, obviously you can't make people go and be on stag duty or do something, which is a challenge when you are trying to run an event. You could be running a team. You could even just be in the team, because they're, if you're at an event where you are a member of, say, a 40-unit faction, you've got a nice organization set out, you've got multiple teams and squads, and then it's split down into, your team has stag duty for 2 hours, and you're there until 2 a.m. in the morning, you're waiting to be relieved, and then it turns out that the team who are meant to be relieving you basically are still asleep. They haven't woken up, they can't be bothered or anything like that. So that's obviously a challenge in itself. But enforced sleep and rest cycles, probably not going to happen. This was a suggestion by ChatGPT, and it suggested that the implementation could be mandatory rest periods or fatigue penalties, e.g. blurred goggles, restricted movement to simulate exhaustion, guard shifts, add tension even during downtime. So I think ultimately, James said from Defiant, I promise you can make people stag. So, it's a challenge, and stag duty is ultimately important. If you're going to an airsoft event, you do need to give the stag duty role something to do. You can't just sit, a group of players just guarding some pointless location for 12 hours in shifts on the basis of it's what they do in the military. It's ultimately people have paid to be at that event, and it's an important facet that you have to get right. Basically, if you've got people on stag for extended periods of time, they will get bored. You need to give them something to do. Now, that could be something along the lines of like Civ Pop or Op 4, sort of coming in and out of the fob. Maybe you have to make sure that there's a regular kind of engagement, or it doesn't even need to be firefights. It could just be something going on for them to deal with. So it could be, requesting directions. You always see the MilSim players that rock up and they've always lost their dog on Op 4. There's always a lost dog or spotting owls or something like that. So stag duty is important, but I don't think you can really enforce sleep and rest cycles. I think they are generally enforced anyway on the basis of, if you have a rota, people want some downtime. You can't just perpetually run for 48 hours because you will likely just crash at some point during that period anyway, and then potentially you could end up quite seriously hurting yourself. Marky Mark says, surely you'd use your stag time to get some food down your neck, and then your downtime sort out a bit of admin and sleep. And exactly that. It's important. We've all seen players that rock up to events who aren't really able to look after themselves in terms of eating and the like. And that's not because they physically can't look after themselves, but they get swept up in the event. There's a lot of adrenaline going on. There's a lot of stuff happening. People want to enjoy that and engage with that. And I do feel that sometimes the mere looking after yourself, drinking water, drinking enough water, making sure you've got sort of electrolytes and salts and things. If you're getting particularly sweaty on hot days, or with food and everything like that, it does tend to get left in the dust of the action a little bit. So it's important to get some downtime, and it's important to have that. And there's different ways of doing it. You can have follow the MilSim West example. So with the medicing of MilSim West, you can really kind of have a bottle of water that you drink as part of your medic procedure. If you've got a downtime period of say 30 minutes to an hour, it could just be that, right, I'm hit out. I'm now going to just take that opportunity just to chill out, take a breather, get yourself squared away, rebomb, etc., etc. So whilst you can't really enforce sleep cycles and rest cycles, I think they kind of naturally fall into that progression of timetables. But yeah, James says you do not go to a MilSim as a conventional force and not expect to do stag. So yes, there will be some element of stag. And stag is important as long as there is a principle of, you've got other teams there who are relying on you to protect them because they don't want to get woken up. That's kind of the worst case scenario for a MilSim. You don't want to get woken up. If you've got your head down, you finally grabbed a couple hours of sleep. You don't want to be woken up with a barrel in your face, or someone, waking up going, you're dead. Because it's just not nice. It's not a nice way to wake up at the best of times anyway. So, stag duty is important. It allows that kind of sense of protection and everything like that. So when you do have a stag rota, you have a rota for a reason, same as doing a chore rota or anything like that. It's not something there just for the benefit of having it. But that being said, you can get some events where you are on stag for an extended period of time for no reason. And that's a challenge that has to be met. The next one it suggested was simulated comms, blackouts, and jamming. So this is an interesting concept. So this kind of goes down the route of suggesting that you could simulate blackouts with comms failures. We kind of touched on this on the previous part 1 episode with weapon failures. So, for example, airsoft guns are not reliable platforms at the best of times. So there's not really any huge advantage to having, fake jams and things like that that are trying to emulate realistic scenarios, because likely you've already got a teammate that's kind of swearing in the corner because their gun's fallen apart or vented all the gas out of a mag or anything like that. So there's an unrealistic need to create that kind of level of immersion on that front. But comms, blackouts, and jamming is an interesting one, because comms setups, depending on the scenario and the location and how many rigs that you've got going in the same area on similar frequencies, can be a challenge anyway. But things like comms breakdown, you can implement that in an interesting way. So, for example, you might have to rely on runners, other forms of signaling. Hi, Phil. So it might be, for example, that, the event works on the principle of, right, we actively want to kind of minimize the use of radio comms for some reason. So potentially, we've been looking at the use of field telephones as an example of another form of communication. So it might give you that kind of event which goes, right, okay, we're going to take you out of your comfort zone a little bit. A lot of people have comms. A lot of people are used to using, their Baofeng walkie-talkies or anything like that. go, right, we now need you to implement a structure as a team whereby you create your own comm system. And that's an interesting concept because, none of us, for example, can use, well, I say none of us, I would imagine very few of us can use Semaphore proactively enough to actually enable, adequate comms. And I guarantee you that if you rock up to the event being an absolute Semaphore expert, there is a very high possibility that you're going to be the only one at that event who can adequately raise flags in a certain way to tell you that there's an enemy 200 meters who's a sniper hiding in the building on the first floor window. So that's obviously a challenge, but it gives you that opportunity to also practice for when comms do go down. Comms are so unreliable. Radios are an absolute pain in the arse. You've got dead batteries, dead zones. You've got people with incompatible headsets, PTTs and handsets. There's all these things that can just fuck it up completely. Then you get some dingbat that doesn't know they're on the right frequencies. They haven't bothered to change them for the event on the basis of, that's how it was at a previous event. So even with that all going on, it actually helps teach you to utilize comms in a different way, because you can't just rock up to a MilSim and go, oh, I haven't got comms to 0. That's it. I'm just going to, go rogue for the rest of the weekend, because that's going to fuck up the event for the organizer. If you've got, pre-laid scenarios that are kind of designed and very carefully crafted around that event, where you're potentially completely fucking that up as well. So it's a challenge, and it's a good idea to practice alternative ways and kind of get used to that. So as an event, you could potentially utilize that as a methodology, both for training potentially, but it would definitely create a completely different dynamic to that event. You've got players kind of rocking up on the basis of, yeah, no, it's fine, we're going to use radios, it will be fine, and then take them all away from everyone. Just no radios, that's it. I can imagine how well that would go down. James is probably furiously typing at the moment, this doesn't work, terrible idea. Marky Mark says most airsofters at the best of times can't manage to get comms to work properly, even with some event organisers handling out the frequencies and settings. Exactly. It's a nightmare. The biggest challenge I see with comms is that you get, you've got your settings, everything like that, but most people don't understand how to program their own radio. So, for example, you can give them all the settings in the world. People don't read all the information that they get from events before they rock up. And even if they do, people don't necessarily know how to program their radios. The number of people that I personally have had to kind of program their radio to get working at an event, I can't even bear to think what that number sits at. It's definitely over the hundreds over the years that I've been doing it. But yeah, radio frequencies and the like is a challenge. Then you've got issues with cross connectivity between the frequencies and kind of the bleeding of one frequency into another. You've got dynamic challenges with people moving around, the range, the distances, and the obstacles kind of forming in between that. You've got topographical difficulties, with just the sheer, you've got a hill in the middle of the site and you've got 2 people either side, that can potentially cause issues. And then incompatible equipment, as I said earlier, radio frequencies are, it's a science. It really is a science. But we kind of take this unit that says it emits 5 watts. If you're looking at a Baofeng, whether it actually does or not, and then you take an aerial from some random company that you found because you bought it because it looked cool, and you put the 2 together, and then they don't really work properly. And even when you've got your radio and your aerial all nicely fine-tuned, you then plug it into a PTT that doesn't connect to the headset, or the headset's broken, or there's a bit of cable that links everything together that's snapped, and you don't realise it's in the internal. It's just a nightmare. So Phil says, fantastic topic choice. We have an event coming up where monitoring the opposition radio channel is allowed. This is a first for us, as we're now looking for ways to work around it. And exactly that, just don't use radios. Use runners, use comms that just don't rely on those sorts of signals. I highly recommend. I've been looking into field telephones. So I went to Military Odyssey last year and purchased a couple of British Army Raycall PA 2000s or RA 2000s, which are kind of they're not the most up-to-date platform for field telephones, but they kind of run off the analog cable, which is something that we're hoping to kind of develop for use in some events at some point, just on the basis it gives an extra dynamic to that event. Obviously, laying cable at an event might be a little bit of a boring situation, but we're sort of hoping to kind of create a team of, I don't know, this is all hypothetical at this point, but we were kind of thinking along the lines of having telephone engineers who are effectively in charge of making those, or keeping those phones in operation. So, for example, if we've got a cable, we could potentially have it where if it's cheap cable, because I don't really want to do it to the expensive stuff, someone comes along with a pair of bolt cutters and snips it. That kills the comms. Then potentially you have one or two radio operators or phone linesmen who basically have to go out, find that fault and fix it in the field whilst under guards, in terms of obviously wanting to maintain that connection. So I don't know. It's just one of those kind of new ideas. Harry Badger and I have been talking about the idea of coming up with like a field telephone interchange, so you can have a number of phones coming in. So potentially one of the roles of stag duty is that you have to monitor that interchange, which could again add a different dynamic. But it's an idea. Drew says radio use antennas, washing machines use aerial. I'm sorry, Drew. I'm sorry, slip of the tongue. But, washing machines do live longer with Calgon, and I don't know about radios. Phil says covering 400 hectares with cable phones might be a logistical problem. You only need one cable, but it is a logistical problem. And again, for an event, you're probably not going to be laying out, miles of telephone cable. But yeah, Drew says buy a roll of D10 for your telephone. So D10 is quite expensive, and I've been looking at trying to find a cheaper option. Whether it's some kind of cheaper electrical cable or something like that you can procure from modern day electrical shops, as opposed to trying to find D10, because I've been scouring the internet for D10 cable, and it is hard to find cheaply. Let me put it that way. It's hard to find cheaply. You can find it. So my plan is to hit Military Odyssey again this year, see hopefully if I can find a supplier for some of that. Meshtastic. Yes, Phil. That's another product that, I'm looking to buy one. Hopefully next month. I was hoping to do it this month, but it might be next month. Just challenges at work at the moment with potential redundancies. But Meshtastic, for those that don't know, is a device which basically provides it provides that connectivity between different devices sort of within the range of those aerials without needing an external signal. So, for example, it works very similar to like a radio, like a Baofeng or your walkie-talkie. But it has the ability to send more than just it can't send audio, for example, but you can send GPS signals and texts and things like that. So it basically creates an opportunity which you can bounce signals and information to each other. And it works along the lines of like a squad net. So, for example, if you've got person A is too far from person B, but person C is standing in the middle, it will bounce that signal through them to allow that kind of use of that group of people, basically. So you can kind of get that signal around the group. So it would be particularly useful if you could use it for audio. As far as I'm aware, it doesn't work for that at the moment, but we've been looking into using it potentially for GPS coordination as a way to kind of tie it into the Ares Alpha app or Blue Force tracking. So that would basically take away the requirement from a mobile phone, because the Meshtastic devices can be equipped with a GPS module, which would mean that it's constantly kind of bouncing that information around. So rather than have, 12 players on your team that requiring to have their mobile phones on and powered and signal and kind of uploading the information to the cloud server, the Meshtastic devices can kind of synchronize themselves. You can have another couple laid as almost base stations kind of around the site, which would just bounce that information around and then kind of come back to a command and control point, which you can then use with a more stable platform. Maybe it's somewhere with Wi-Fi, for example. Maybe you just crack it on near a safe zone. I don't know. But that's the kind of the idea of how we were thinking about using Meshtastic. Phil says, I'm absolutely not technically knowledgeable enough to know how it works. So one little trick that I found with Meshtastic is there is an excellent website, which I will look it up for you, which has a bunch of information, and it is called the Meshtastic website. So if you go on there, there's a whole wiki on there in terms of sort of finding out, choosing a device, how to configure your device and connecting. And then there's a bunch of information on there, as well as YouTube and the like, for how you can kind of set these systems up. On top of that as well, ChatGPT. Like, I can't recommend ChatGPT enough at the moment. I'm using it almost on the daily for as a research tool, really. So, if you've got a question, you want to know how to do something, have a little look at that and ask it a question. And if you don't understand it, just ask it to explain it again in a more simple way. Just, say, and I mean, I've used phrases that explain this to me like I'm a 5-year-old, and it just breaks it down into really simple language. And then you can build up from that understanding and that knowledge base. One thing I was playing around with at the weekend was the concept of an airsoft flamethrower. I was using ChatGPT as a bit of a thought experiment to just kind of plug some ideas in and sort of work out how that could work as an idea. Now, not one that kind of just spews an endless stream of BBs, because that's pretty wasteful, to be honest with you. That's not really going to provide much advantage. I was looking at more of a smoke generator device. So, for example, you could have a battery-operated sort of pyrotechnic smoke device in the kind of the traditional, fuel backpack, which is then off a trigger system to a tube that will basically allow you to fire like orange smoke into a location. So potentially that would be an interesting way of, and again, another dynamic. So, for example, like Vietnam style events, I was thinking like the alien events that Octo run, or Gunman run, sorry. I don't know if they're Octo or Gunman, actually. I know Gunman own Octo. So, but yeah, so like the flamethrower type thing. But again, just asking ChatGPT, it's throwing ideas at you. You can kind of follow it down different trains of thought. So if you're interested in Meshtastic, I highly recommend the Meshtastic website and looking that up, basically. Hello to November 52. Welcome to the November Foxtrot. Late again, and what do I find? 2 of them are absent. Unfortunately, Andy is off sick, and Lance said he might be joining, but then he also said that there might be a family commitment. So I'm just going to continue going. I'll run through the list that I've got. I have been known to talk for very long periods of time on my own previously. So yeah, feel free to get involved. If you want to ask any questions, you can push a little cue at the beginning. I'll sort of try and pick that up. Phil says, do you mean a dry powder extinguisher? So that's not a bad idea. I hadn't even considered that. I was trying to make it nice and safe, though. So if someone is in the building, I don't want to just smother them in dry powder, basically, because obviously those things, once they get going, their whole intention is to just smother the area with that powder. Do the laugh. I'm not doing the laugh. So once you've basically got the people in the building or whatever, I don't want to fire powder into the building and then just cause them all sorts of future respiratory issues and things like that. Whereas I was thinking like not so much a dry ice, but like the pyrotechnic smoke generators. You can get different coloured dyes for those, which are all meant to be food safe and everything like that. So ultimately, whilst it is still a smoke and, there's potential there to cause some upset, it's not kind of, I don't want to give people cancer. That would be a nightmare. Right. So next on the list, working kind of, that was about comms. We got into talk about flamethrowers. Dynamic mission objectives based on player actions. So for those of you that heard anything about the event that we ran, where we had the Operation Phoenix, I apologize. It was Operation Phoenix. This was based on a post-apocalyptic scenario. And the idea was that the whole storyline was kind of set and provided up to a point where you joined the event, and then your actions during that event would change the dynamic. If you've ever played any kind of computer game that has the ability for you to make different actions and it takes you down different paths, Call of Duty's had this where, if you shoot certain players multiple times, it will fail the mission. If you have there's various. Bandersnatch was a classic example on Netflix as well, where the story that you wanted to follow was based on the decision making that you made as you went through, and that was how that event was set up. So the principle was that if you made friends with the civilian population, then that would give you advantages later on in the game. A lot of events will do this, but they generally kind of tend to circle back to potentially sort of pre-scripted scenarios, which, I can see, because ultimately you want to make sure that an event follows a storyline arc of some sort. Otherwise, it's just basically, potentially devolving into a skirmish. Terry wants a Phoenix 2, please, Mike. So there is something potentially in the pipeline. We have some ideas, but with nothing yet set firm in stone, unfortunately. November 52, Mike, are you going to the JBG in Wickford? So at the moment, my events are few and far between, to be honest with you. I have a MilSim day planned, or a Battle Sim day planned at Apocalypse. I think that's in March. Other than that, I'll be honest with you, my calendar is very lackluster at the moment in terms of what's going on, just because work is very chaotic. And you get to a point where, trying to organize myself, I'm kind of relying on other people generally to go, oh yeah, go to this event, it's going to be really good. And then I'm like, okay, yeah, cool, I'll be there. But with kids as well, it's a bit of a challenge. So maybe November 52, I don't know at the moment. At the moment, I'm not. But who's to say that won't change? I don't know. So, yeah. Drew said, I would like an airsoft-based holiday week long. I can see that. That would be an interesting event. I personally would get absolutely slated by my wife for taking a week out of my life to do airsoft. I might have to do that and then not do airsoft for 6 months. But that would be cool. Imagine doing a proper week-long intensive airsoft experience. You would definitely need a big site for that, though, because I feel like a week's worth of crawling around us, like a couple hectares, would get a bit boring after a while. But wait and see. Right. Marky Mark suggested HPA taking a sandblasting gun with powder instead of sand. So again, trying to avoid the whole powder thing. I was looking up at the powder paints and the like that they use for sort of various festivals around the world. But again, people get really anal about, even mud on their kit. Imagine me rocking up and then blasting them with a whole load of orange powder. I can't imagine they'd be particularly happy. So, it's an idea. I've tried to rule out any kind of liquids or powders at the moment in favour of sort of a smoke. The ChatGPT interestingly suggested using an Enola Gay in a kind of ceramic device. So you basically let this grenade off, and then you all you do is effectively open a release valve for it, and the smoke would come out, and have a fan behind that to kind of give that some power. But again, you then got a grenade that you have to let off before you want to use it. Whereas one of these sort of smoke element systems, you can power up. So there's still a little bit of a warming up phase. But once it's on, you can then just run around this all trigger based, then you can turn it off again. So it's just an idea. Right, so going back to dynamic mission objectives, there is nothing better than when you are in an event where, right, okay, we've progressed to location X, we've managed to secure that, we've got the opportunity to November 52. I take it you now know who this is. I don't, to be honest with you. I am none the wiser. I apologise. Land Dev Challenge, sorry guys, I'm late. Sorry, and Marky Mark says smoke grenade and a fan. Yeah, exactly that. That's what ChatGPT suggested. So I don't know. It's just an idea at the back of my mind at the moment. The smoke, I got to a point with it where the smoke system was going to be like 700 quid, and I was like, oh, that's a little bit too much money to play around with it at the moment. So, but maybe one to watch for the future. But dynamic mission objectives, before I get too distracted, is the idea where if you fail to secure an area, that could lead to future ambushes or harder objectives. You could have perks or losses. So, for example, with some events, it might be that you could gain additional ammo. So if you look at things like the sniper events that Empire Rising and Empire Airsoft did previously, where the snipers would have to kind of go to certain locations to kind of win additional ammunition that they can have. But then, you could have it so that you got like a civilian population that, slowly turns into, oh, it's Chris. Hi, Chris. civilian populations that slowly turn into rebels, for example, which could be on your side or not. You could have, I don't know, water. Say that you've got an event where you are having to refill your water from certain water sources. It might be that the civilian population gives you an opportunity to, they'll protect you from whilst using that water supply or something like that. So having that kind of dynamic flow of the event can be more interesting, but it is a nightmare to write, and it is very hard to manage, and it does require a lot of very much on the fly thinking for how you can resolve things. Especially, with our event, one of the key challenges was that we'd organised it on the principle of having, a certain number of people arrive. We didn't make those numbers, so then we had to, the night before, basically go, right, okay, how is this going to work? How are we going to rejig this to kind of keep the event dynamic and live? I don't think we did a terrible job. I won't say we did the best job in the world. Ultimately, it's the first event that I have properly run from that kind of perspective, from an actual MilSim game. But we had fixed objectives. So we had certain locations that we couldn't just move because they needed a tractor to drag them, which we didn't have to hands that we could deal with the night before. So there's obviously certain learning points and things that you can take forward from that. But dynamic objectives, I think make a massive difference. Let's talk about intelligence gathering and decryption, because this kind of falls into the dynamic objectives as well. So if anybody has been aware of the Machiavellian events from Defiant, they are a good example of this. So those are events which pretty much rely on you undertaking an element of observation, information recording, to allow them to compile kind of tasking packages. So, for example, you might have an Overwatch point that's been sitting there for the last 3 or 4 hours, watching a location, trying to determine who kind of the hierarchy there, who's the boss. And then once that information's kind of been relayed, filtered and digested, a tasking package comes out of that and is then issued to, be it the Overwatch team or some other teams or whatever you've got in the area, to form that tasking group to go and snatch that person, or to take them out or something like that. So having intelligence-led events, I think, adds a good element of immersion. Now, they can be boring, I'm not going to lie. They will only cater to a kind of a certain type of person, I would imagine. We've all been to a skirmish day. We know that there's skirmishes. We know that there's speed softers. MilSims are the same. How many MilSims have we been to where there are times where you see players just getting frustrated because they're getting a bit bored? They want that trigger time. They want that kind of little bit more action. Then you've got people like your snipers who, fall into kind of two camps, really. You've got the ones that actively want to go out. They want to get the action. And then there's the ones that are kind of more willing to sit back, wait for that perfect headshot. And I think that's the same with intelligence gathering. I think there's an element to it that adds a real immersion to an event. If you've got a team of 4 or 5 guys, we had this at Machiavellian Alpha, there are 4 or 5 of us. We snuck into position overnight before the event. We carved out an OP from a particularly thorny bramble bush. And then we spent pretty much 12 hours sitting in that bush, taking information. We had another OP, maybe sort of 150, 200 meters out to our kind of right side, that had a better Overwatch position. We were then relaying information from that OP to our harbour area, I guess, or our LUP. And then that information was then being pulled together, collected, collated. We were noting down everything. So, from some music going off that was particularly annoying, to certain people walking past, anything like that. Collating that information, we then use WhatsApp to just ping the messages over to command. And that allowed command to then build those task packages, of which we then carried out sort of at a later date. So that was an interesting event. It's something that definitely adds that level of immersion. And if you have the temperament for it, I highly recommend having a go, because it will stress you in different ways. You're not just relying on a proper skirmish pew pew type event. You're testing yourself, right? Can I withstand the cold? Can I withstand the boredom? Can I work together as a team to collect this information? And there's different challenges to it. You never skip leg day, so I would suggest never skipping intel day either. That would be funny if there were other people here. They'd laugh. So, yeah. Right, the next one on the list that we had was civilian role players with impactful interactions. I think I've said this enough times on the podcast that it's pretty much a default now, but Civ Pop make an event. They are so fundamental, in my opinion, to make an event more interesting. Even if it's force on force, you've got the capability where there's unknowns going on. If it's just force on force, it might as well be a skirmish day. You might as well have all the players whacking on different coloured armbands and just shooting the shit out of each other. It would be very reticent of current war that's going on, Ukraine, Russia. It's very similar to that at the moment. But adding civilians into the mix, whilst obviously it is more immersive, and there are risks with that, because obviously we don't want to be just stereotyping things like war crimes and stuff like that, because there's a delicate line to be drawn. But when you have different factions in an event where you can have those interactions with people, it might be that they can give you information. If there's a civilian coming towards you, they've probably got more information on what's ahead of you than you're going to have. So, if you've built that relationship with them, hearts and minds, giving them some Haribo and everything like that, it makes it a more interesting event. You can talk to those people. You can if they're good characters as well, that makes it more immersive and more interesting. I mean, even if it's someone that is acting a character that doesn't speak English, trying to communicate with them by you're shouting at them louder in English, for example, as most tourists from England unfortunately do. Pointy talkie cards and things like that, which are the ones that were issued to US soldiers in Afghanistan and Iraq, where you can try and communicate with, it's a set of cards that you can point at, and they've got different pictograms and things on there to explain that information, and you can sort of try and convey that. But having civilians, it just makes things more interesting. Look at the recent JBG event. I've seen some videos and pictures coming out from the weekend, where they were doing some stuff at the Blackstone CQB site. If you're doing CQB style gameplay of anything, you want that shoot, no shoot. You want to be, having to deal with complicated situations. If you're just running into a room and just blapping the first person that you see, it's dynamic from that perspective, and you're getting your kill, you're enjoying airsoft. But this is a MilSim, so we're talking about that kind of LARPing and that simulation aspect. And having civilians there means that you can talk to them, you can engage with them. You've got someone that's potentially scared of you that you now have to kind of placate to get out of that situation. Maybe it's someone acting suspiciously. Maybe, and it depends on the event, you need to engage sort of search procedures to make sure they're not carrying weapons. They might be concealing IEDs or anything like that. It's all that extra stuff that doesn't take much to add to an event, but will massively benefit the player if it's done correctly. And it's the same with any additional factions. So if you've got a force on force scenario, throw in a UN faction. They don't have to be the hardcore milsimmers, so to speak. It might be the kind of the faction which caters more for kind of skirmish players that want to have a go, but need a little bit more kind of hand holding. And Op 4 is really good for Op 4 is really good for skirmishers to get into a MilSim, because ultimately that seems to be like the least hand-holdy version of that. There's obviously certain things that you need to do and kind of help with that event. But generally, I would say Op 4 is the most fun. If you want a kind of a soft footing into a kind of NATO-style force or anything like that, the UN kind of forces that I've seen on some events are really good, because they've got very strict ROEs. You've got a clear command and control structure, and you aren't necessarily having to deal with lots of complicated firefights necessarily. You're there as a peacekeeping force. So you still get a bit of blap on, but you also get that experience of being very MilSim heavy, and there's a lot of opportunities to be dynamic and working with local populations and the like. So I apologise. There's been a whole load of stuff coming while I've been talking. Drew says, I used to work at 14 Sig Reg Electronic Warfare. If you want to know basic direction finding, call sign stacking and jamming, just let me know. caveated with it also, I was diagnosed with PTSD. Oh, okay. Oh, and bipolar, so it might take a bit of time. I'm sorry to hear that, Drew. I mean, jamming you have to be careful with because obviously that's illegal in the UK to jam radio equipment. But, you know, having the ability, I'd love to get one of those proper directional antennas to kind of work out where locations or signals are coming from. Because, again, with larger scale events, with, I don't know, say you were running an event at like Ground Zero in the UK, which is, I think it's like 150 acres of airsoft site, basically, or hectares, acres. It's an awful lot of land that you've got to cover. And if you're trying to find the enemy, you know, it's a perfect opportunity. If you've got some way of kind of directionally finding radio signals, then that again causes people causes people issues with you've got to not use it because it's going to give you away. It's the equivalent. You might as well just be shouting. Jam with the same radios as operators. You just drop a singing loop on top. I'm pretty certain that's still illegal in the UK. I'm just going to put it out there. I don't know the rules and regulations exactly. I'll defer to your judgment, Drew, because I know you know a lot about this, but I'm of that understanding. But okay. Marky Mark says, where was he? He was talking about something and then I've lost it. Oh, sorry. Mike, I'm staffing a team that has to do all those things. So OpMac, Cross, Op, Phoenix, to provide the event organisers with the up-to-date info on how the event is playing out. So that's a cool blend, because OpMac was kind of that OP aspect, you know, just concealment, don't get involved necessarily, just observe and record. Whereas Op Phoenix was a lot more different in terms of, you know, that dynamic approach. I've been joined by Lance.
Hello. I'm so sorry. I left my phone at home and I didn't see that Andy was waylaid.
42 minutes of me talking so far. We're getting there.
Nicely done. Nicely done. Hello, everybody.
Welcome, Lance. Welcome. How are you?
I'm all right, mate. Thanks. Yeah, just a bit turbo trying to set up. I was like, oh my God, where's the fucking headset?
No, that's fine. That's fine. Well, we've just finished civilian role players and impactful interaction. So we're just talking about night vision and light discipline. So not necessarily NVGs. This is talking about light discipline and kind of, I guess we'll roll sound discipline into that in events to make the event more immersive. Drew says, fuck. Oh, fell downhill now.
Sorry, guys. Oh, I did find my jumper, though. I've got my special jumper on, so.
Well done. I can have a proper drink.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's have a drink, shall we?
Oh, yeah, Landlav. We should do a fox hunt, radio detection, hide and seek. Exactly. That would be proper cool to have the proper radio, the directional antennas where you kind of just sweeping them around to locate people. And then, again, that's another level of intel that you could have being fed back to your command structure. You know, if you've got the capability as well of intercepting that, but it does depend on the event because there's already enough going on for some event organisers. They don't want to be sitting there having to deal with teams sliding around on the frequency spectrum trying to get their comms to work and avoid, you know, hunter units who are basically identifying them and then listening in. LandNav, are you not doing an E&E event? Oh, that's not to us, that's to LandNav. Fine, just use this as a post box.
Yeah, we'll just sit back.
Right, Lance, have a chat about sound discipline and light discipline, how that can make an event more immersive. Because I need genuinely just 30 seconds of not talking.
Oh, you'll struggle with that, I reckon. Oh no, now he's frozen. I know he's back.
No, I'm here. I'm still here.
You're there. Cool. Yeah, noise and light discipline.
I'm just going to leave you now. I've done my shift. You're in.
Yeah, just going to sit down for a minute. Been running around like a blue-ass fly setting up. Yeah, I mean, yeah, essentially it can make or break an event, really, because if you've got like a team that's quite well seasoned and they're sort of down with their drills, you know, nighttime like setups and things like that, you know, patrolling, not just constantly flashing on and on white light and this, that, and the other. And obviously, noise travels a great deal more at nighttime compared to someone who's not done it before, who's very green, or on the flip side of that, someone who's who's not really taking it as seriously as they should. And I know it's only a game and blah blah blah, but there is an element of seriousness to it because, like we've always said, you don't want to do things that are going to affect other people's enjoyment, to the detriment of other people's enjoyment to the event. So if you're prattling about and shouting and hollering, calling your mate out and this, that, and the other, that's then going to have an adverse effect on your Op 4 or Blue Force side as a role, the way you're portraying yourselves when you've got two other three teams out on the ground that are being all tactical and sneaky beaky, and you're just like fucking monkeys in a cage in the middle. It just doesn't look very good. Do you know what I mean? And I know you personally for you're probably having a laugh at that, but that's just it's just not cool to do that. So when it comes to noise and light discipline and things like that, there's lots of literature about it. There's stuff online you can look up on based, and a lot of it's common sense. Giving yourself 10-15 minutes before you leave your harbour area at night time to let your eyes adjust. Keeping all bright light down, just using red light as and when you need to. Very low level light, keeping it facing down at the ground, like I said, as and when. Letting your eyes adjust and being cautious, moving slowly. And a great thing is obviously if you've been out on the ground during the day patrolling, trying to take mental memories of things you've seen out on the ground during the day that you could well again encounter at night time. Obviously during the day things are an awful lot easier to traverse and navigate around. At night time you're not even going to know they're there. So remember guys, there's that ditch there as we get towards the end of the wood block. There's that quite a deep trench to the right.
There's a hole up ahead.
Stuff like, and it's little bits like that that are sort of key to sort of like keeping you moving around the map or moving around the AO if you like at night time. If you've not got the option of having nods and things like that, it is achievable because I've done it for me, and you do it now, Mike. I've done it for many years. You get used to an area through the day. You haven't got nods that you use at night time. Granted, you've got thermals, so you do get outlines of trees and buildings and this, that, and the other. So you can navigate with thermal. Obviously, it's a lot easier with Gen 2 plus nods or whatnot. But it is achievable with thermal, and having said, and it's still achievable with the naked eye. If you've got a clear sky, if you've got starlight, and if you've got like even a half crescent moon, that's more than enough light for you to navigate through a woodland because you'll get shadow in. Obviously, directly on the floor, it's going to still be a slow process, but it is doable. We've done it over Dorman's Land Woods many a time at the private site for events. Perfect example, Terry Little when his guys were up there. They had nods, this, that, and the other, and all we had was white light, as we were like the hunter force, if you like. And we sort of, even Terry said at the end of that event, he said, I've not seen a team use white light and noise and light discipline as well as what I saw you guys do, because we're well drilled with it, because we've done MilSims for many years without having those sort of specialist aids to help you at navigation at night time. So you sort of become accustomed to it, which is cool. But yeah,
we very regularly forget to put batteries in our torches and things like that. So sometimes it's just inadvertent practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Adapt and overcome. I mean, I did it with my thermal scope. Obviously the amount of batteries I have to take out with that. And I think we was at Dog Tag for a MilSim. I think it was an SEO event,
them, isn't it?
And it was like, lads, everyone's just going through all their kit, just looking for a AA battery. It's like, I need 4. We need to make 4 batteries between 8 of us for us to get back. That's the challenge. But yeah, all good fun. We got back in the end. Yeah. So, but yeah, it can. Like I said, it does. It would have an adverse effect a MilSim event if you are just not taking it very seriously and your noise and light discipline drills are poor. So that's something, and it's a very simple thing to work on. And it's after an hour or so with some seasoned players, you should have a quite a good grasp on what's expected of you when it comes to using torches, headlights, your tack light on your riff. And obviously noise does travel a lot more at night time.
Well, it's a simple thing that you can do as well. So, I mean, if you're at an event which, noise and light discipline aren't really important, for whatever reason, it's not really a requirement per se. But people go to an event, they dress in camouflage, they want to be concealed.
Don't worry, I am still here.
Oh, that's fine. People go, they wear concealment, they wear ghillie hoods, they wear... all of this stuff to kind of hide from the enemy. Light and noise discipline are exactly that. They are just additional layers of camouflage. If you can sneak up on the enemy, you're going to have a much better chance of being able to actually hit them with your BB. So it's a simple thing that you can enact. It doesn't necessarily, cost you a great deal of money. You don't have to go down the route of NVG and thermal or whatever to kind of get some benefits from that. You are going to be slightly... in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. So if you are coming up against an entire team who are equipped with thermal and MVG, you're fucked regardless. Like, you know, these devices give such a significant increase in just available potential to find the enemy and deal with them. That it's going to be a challenge anyway. So if you can just get used to using kind of light drills and stuff.
I mean, I get the MVG, but I mean, for me, the thermal, it's just a massive force multiplier. It's you know, it really is next level because, and I'll never forget it. And it was an event we did at Apocalypse years ago, and I'd not long had my thermal scope, and we patrolled down through what was the airfield back then, and literally we had Op4 forces in the woodblock to our front, like in between sort of like the safe zone exit into the playing field and like the start of the airfield. So in that, where sort of the fuel dump was to the right of it, going back towards safe zone, there was a scattering of like probably 9 to 10 Op4 dudes, and I was on point purely because I had the thermal scope, and it was literally like a turkey shoot. And although and initially, obviously, it was great fun for me, and it was just like, yeah, target hit. Obviously, they didn't know where it was coming from because there's no IR, there's no reflection, there's no light, there's nothing like that. There's nothing emitted from a thermal scope. But then afterwards, sort of looking back on it, I thought, well, I had like 7 guys behind me there that didn't really do a great deal, and it's sort of like, meh. Whereas,
yeah, I think there's
if I didn't have that,
out completely.
Yeah, I mean, if I didn't have that, and we'd got into and then obviously the enemy did get the drop on us, and they weren't lined up for like an ambush or anything. They were sporadically spread. Like literally, it was like a section of 8 had just gone. Well, no, it wasn't even that. They just suddenly decided to just go and hide behind a tree each, and it was really sort of like chaotic. It wasn't like an organised like a spearhead or extended line or anything like that. It was just people in the woods. And I thought, well, maybe if I hadn't have had that, and one of them got the drop on us, put a few rounds down, you know, maybe one of us might have got hit, but it would have allowed us to go full white light into that woodblock and have a firefight and be more exciting. Whereas in a selfish but not realising it was a selfish way, I just sort of got the glory and boom, 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 boom. And like, obviously from a personal point of view, yeah, that's really cool, great, yeah, I did that, yeah, thermal scope, bow, 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 bow. But then it's like 7 dudes behind me are just like, yeah, I still got full mag, what the fuck? Do you know what I mean? So, you know, looking back on it, you know, but they are a great aid to have. Now, whether you, and then obviously we're talking the realism of MilSim and this, that, and the other. Do you limit the amount of thermal tech there are per force, per unit, per section, or is it just if you've got it, you can use it? I mean, I know, and that's a real conversation for contention as to whether MVGs are sort of overused. But then again, if it's a MilSim and it's night time, nearly every man in the section is going to have nods and this, that, and the other. So NVG is more acceptable on that front because I don't think having an MVG setup, be it like 2+ or Gen 4s or whatever, is such an enormous force multiplier as what a thermal scope would be. Because you can still hide from it. You can still hunker down in a bush, stay nice and quiet, nice and low. Your camo's on point. You've got no shiny bits, this, that, and the other. You know what I mean? Your paint's all good, and you can sort of outwit a night vision setup. But when it comes to thermal, unless you're behind a caravan window, you're fucked. Essentially, aren't you?
Well, ultimately, you know, these setups are used for real steel scenarios. So you aren't necessarily fighting within 60 meters of each other. You know what I mean? Like, I get that there are scenarios where they are fighting in 60 meters of each other, and fine, that makes a lot more sense. But you know, when you're looking at these long-range thermal hunting scopes and stuff, where they've got excellent visibility of anything thermal, any kind of thermal signatures up to like 2K away from them, you know, it's just overkill because you're getting so much more information than a player that doesn't have that. And I do think that thermal is a slight detriment to airsoft.
I do you know what I have to.
I don't have one, so if I had one,
but I've got one, and I do agree with you. And I do agree. And there's been events where we've been allowed to use thermal and night vision, and I have had both at one point. You know, I've had my night vision monocular on my left eye for navigating, and I've had the thermal on the rifle for target acquisition. But I've chosen not to take it purely because I find it more challenging for me as a player and for how I want my event to go personally within the main grand scheme of things, I want to see what I can achieve without having these aids with me. See how I get on, and it's still good. It's still fun. You have to be a bit more switched on. You have to be, and I found when I was using nods, going back to like the noise and light discipline, I was noisier. I didn't really care where I put my feet as much as I would have done if I wasn't using nods.
It's because you're invincible now.
Well, do you know what I mean? But it does. It gives you that placebo effect where it's sort of like, well, I could just go there, and then before you know it, you've left 7 of you guys behind. Because they're still sort of working out where they're going, they're putting their feet, they're rolling their feet as they're putting them down, and they're going high, side, heel, toe when they're walking, so they're not making as much noise, this, that, and the other. But you're gone, you're on target already, and then you're waiting around then for the other guys to catch up. But probably there's a good 75% chance that the enemy's heard you coming because you got your nods on, you donk through the woods because you know where all the obstacles are, you can see them quite clearly, So yeah, I found it a really good challenge to not use it, and to be fair, I enjoyed it. And you weren't carrying as much kit, and you didn't have to worry about as many batteries or power banks and this, that, and the other. So,
or losing it, or damaging it, or
losing it, damaging it. This, going back like what you said then about it's obviously from the real steel point of view, the distance of target. In an ideal world, if you could play airsoft at real steel distances, but the impact was still the same as if you were 30 meters away. Let's say, some thermal scopes are accurate up to like nearly, 900 meters, a kilometer away, perhaps. Do you know what I mean? It's crazy. If you've got that sort of type tech on your riff and you're engaging people 40 meters away, you're going to hit them. It doesn't matter. It could be not zeroed. There's a good chance you're still going to hit them. Because you'll fire one round and go, I just got to move over there a little bit, bang bang. And that's the trouble with it. It's not scalable to airsoft. It's either force multiplier, it's game over for the other team, and there's no in between. There's no middle ground with it.
It's like rocking up in a tank, really. Because
essentially, it's like inventing a rule.
There is nothing that can defeat an actual tank. Like in airsoft, if you're in a tank, you are firing a projectile at someone. If you hit them, you're going to hurt them. If you fire a fake rocket at a tank, unless you've got something in the tank,
technically in airsoft though, an Enola Gay Mark V can stop a tank because I've seen it happen at Imperium.
Yeah, true.
And I think one's got to be thrown at the front and one's got to be thrown at the back. So yeah, a 40 million or 100, however much it costs for a tank, a 40 million pound tank could be taken down by £10 worth of Enola Gay. It's just like, there's realism for you. I know there's got. Obviously, I'm taking the piss. There's got to be rules in airsoft to bring the vehicle to a standstill. I'm not taking the piss out of Imperium.
Guys fighting the wars at the moment are like, we've just had this delivery of new anti-tank things. It's just a box of Mark V's. Like, great.
Brilliant.
Guys, call your hits.
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah. Marshall, we hit the tank at the front and the back with a Mark V. Just saying. It's still moving.
Right, on so the next kind of concept of making a MilSim more sim. Supply chain missions for sustained operations. So in this one, we're talking about kind of teams securing supply routes for food or for water and ammo, convoying materials between locations. So, for example, like with QRF, it could also be things like, if you lose a convoy of materials, it could actually mean a real shortage of supplies, which affects your performance. So you've got like a forward operating base that you're kind of fighting from, and then all of a sudden the ammunition dries up. Obviously, that's going to be a real issue for defending that location. So that's obviously another concept that you can apply to MilSim. What are your thoughts on that, Lance? In terms of, I think ammo is a fairly obvious one. Like if you run out of ammo, that's obviously a challenge anyway. But water, is that something we can take into account as well?
I think there is a place for it. I don't know where it would sit on a majority of events, purely because of the type of event it is. So if you're playing for example, a special forces regiment where you've got like 5 or 6 sections within that special forces element, if you like, or whatever side you're on, and you're doing sort of snatch and grabs or recce or this, that, and the other type missions within the game for the weekend, that supply chain isn't necessarily going to need to be there because you're self-sufficient. You are this, you're only going in for a couple of hours and exfilling, and then you're going back out planning for a bigger push the next day or whatever it might be. Now, if you're say like you said, you've got a forward, you've got a forward patrol base or something like that, or you've got another operational base on the other side of the AO, but your initial like the hard standing at Longmoor is your initial push out point, and you've got to keep that location supplied, then obviously that's different. Then you can have a vehicle convoy at X, Y, Z times during the day, which would have to have a section securing a route for it, this, that, and the other. But that does bring an element into the game of logistics, and like you said, like food supply, ammo supplies, medivacs as well included within that. I'd be more inclined to see an event rather than. And obviously, if the area of the game taking place allows it, would be to have more medivac stuff going on. So if you get, rather than being 3 hits and you're out, so you can have like your first hit bandage, second hit bandage, third hit you're dead and you got to go. That third hit, that should be a critical injury, and you have to be medivaced out. Either a vehicle has to come in or you have to get stretchered out. That would bring a good element into the game, I think, for especially ops like Longmoor, when you've got the woodland and you've got the urban area, things like that, where you can extract casualties or critical casualties back to the main harbour area, and then put them back in. So if you've got, say, 3 or 4 guys from 4 different sections that are injured, you can get them all out back to the harbour area or back to the main PB for 20 minutes or whatever it might be, and then bring them in to the rear of your attack, and then they can rejoin their sections. That would be quite a good element, because then again it's reliant on comms. The section that they've left, they may have moved on, or you need to keep in touch with them as to where they're going to be, and sorting out RV positions and that with them. But I certainly think a medivac, more of a medical extraction role, as opposed to making sure food and water and ammo is supplied to a certain location. I think the medi side of that would be better for a MilSim.
I mean, you could do bandages on that front, can't you? Because obviously, if you've got, even if you kind of strip it back to a kind of a 2 bandage rule, and then you're effectively dead and therefore have to respawn. If you make sure that the people that respawning are way over the other side of the game zone, so it's not a case of they can just simply walk back again to replenish that location. If you've got that issue where you've got limited medical supplies, for example, so you can't keep healing everyone back in, so that's going to start reducing your kill count from, or the number of times you could be hit from, say, sort of 2 or 3 down to 1. Because that medic is struggling with supplies, so it might be they've got to call in medical supplies to replenish that.
And again, that's what you can.
Things with ammo as well, like
for sure,
limited ammo capacity.
We've done. I've done a couple of them. We've been on the review, Mike, where we've had a section bag, section 2-4 or whatever it might be, and we'd all have some speed loaders in there, labelled up, like your own name on it, but in section 24's bag is Lance's speed loader and Mike's bits and bobs and this, that, and the other. So that bag can be grabbed, brought out to you in the field. You can replay them, goes back in the wagon, and off it goes. So that's always cool. It's always good to do that, because there has been times where you've got really into the thick of it, and especially if you think the Vietnam event that we done, when you were going through ammo, like curry to a pisshead. So you needed that resupply, and it was critical, because it was getting points where you see it in the movies. Oh, I'm down to my last mag, and it literally was. I'm literally down to my last mag. I'm going to end up throwing empty mags at them in a minute. Do you know what I mean? Until you get that resupply bag comes in, and it's a really good feeling. It's a really good buzz, and it's another pick me up for the event. Do you know what I mean? It's another little element where the team who's brought you the stuff get a buzz, because they're like, yes, we got it to the lads, back in the fight. And obviously you're happy because you can still shoot people.
It actually makes the QRF a little bit more practical as well, rather than just being there as a pure support force. In terms of, all right, the guys over there need additional guns. It's actually, right, you're bringing them supplies. You're extracting information. It's making that QRF more important. Drew raises a good point. So, Mike, would you carry Lance or drag him for 100 meters? Fuck that. Just let the birds have him. So,
cheers, Drew. Tosser.
But it's an interesting point because obviously, we kind of talk about. He got out of set. He left. We talk about like the medical aspects of obviously carrying and dragging players, etc. I think it's worse when you actually at an event and someone goes, "Oh yeah, I'm going to get you out of the scenario," and then they just put their hand on their shoulder and they kind of walk you out, because I think that looks pretty naff, personally.
Yeah, it does. It does. It looks shit.
It kind of takes away.
But then you've got to take it into account,
Yeah. But then we've been looking up the Rhino Rescue stretcher systems, which is basically for all intents and purposes a tarp with carry drag handles on it, which you would need to be very careful about how you use them, because obviously there's a significant risk if you do start moving someone of dropping them or giving them such severe motion sickness that they are,
which we encountered at Dog Tag,
horribly and violently ill, which we have seen first person. Yeah.
But to be fair, we did carry him a good 500-600 meters, through over undulating land and down slopes, and he was just swinging left and right, and he was fucking green by the time we got him back to the fob. I actually forgot about that. That's really funny.
If you had a system like the like a drag pad or something like that, which isn't quite so. It's not having to fully lift a player off the ground, for example. It's a case of kind of loading them on and just dragging them out of the way. That's potentially 2 or 3 players that need to do that, but that would be more interesting because it's still not just the hand on the shoulder. Right, you come with me, I'll get you out of there.
Well, the thing is, as well, is if you're in an 8-man section, you've got a man down who needs to go in, or a lady down who needs to go into a stretcher. That's 5 people then that are occupying that stretcher. There's obviously the casualty plus the 4, 1 on each corner. It only leaves you with 3 dudes to sort of like navigate your way out of there, offer fire support when needed, to get that casualty out. So again, it adds another element of stress and considerations. Is there the option for a vehicle Kazivac, or is your only way of getting this person back in the game on the stretcher and getting them out?
I am fully on board with Kazivac stuff. The only challenge I think I see with it is the fact that the number of events where we've done that have these rules in place. You can't just respawn. You have to be evacuated out. Again, that's cool, but I've spent like an hour and a half just laying on the ground as a casualty because either the command control structure is broken down, the QRF vehicle has broken down, teams just aren't operating because they've been completely pinned by something going on over here. So it's like they never get to you. So I think there are challenges with any kind of Kazivac scenario. It's almost like the alternative would be you have to bring a medic out from the base to get them to your location to heal you.
Surgeon.
Yeah. It's like, we need a dentist.
Bring the surgeon. We need the surgeon.
But running a field hospital type thing, that might be quite an interesting aspect. Like there's a team that are there as a support role that are basically running a medic center more localized to what's going on. So it's almost like I guess like a battlefield clinic type scenario. I don't know. I'm making terms up there, but that would bring, rather than having to rely on a vehicle to go 400 meters from over there to come and get you, it might be we can kind of drag them 50 meters back to a location where there's a medic who's healing everyone up. Which again is a different way of doing it. So,
well, again, you could like we've done previously, like a Falklands event where we've had a field hospital. We've taken one we've taken one point of interest on the map, and once you've taken the second objective, you can then use your first objective as a field hospital, and sort of then leapfrog it forward through the AO as you progress. So, that's always a good thing. Longmore, for example, once you've taken a section of the village, you could have one building allocated as a field hospital. As like a mobile spawn point, much like Dog Tag do, where they have the deployment bag that you can pull your flag out at, and if the enemy finds it, they put the flag away. You've got to move it then. They're all little good ideas.
As a mobile spawn point, it's like, right, I've got to get that player back to that location before they can leave the AO to then spawn back in. That might be an interesting way of doing it. So rather than have players going, oh yeah, I'm dead. Right, I've got a 30-minute dead timer, and then I'll be back in the game. Maybe it's just a case of going, right, you've got to get to that location. then you can walk back and get spawned in again, which would then slow it down in a more interesting way rather than just I'm just sitting around now for a bit.
I think I'd sooner just go storming out of the AO with rage over my shoulder, just with a ball of fire behind me.
Well, you can leave that for your imagination. If you want to do that as well, you can bypass the Medi Center if you want to. If you can carry the player out, you're more than welcome.
I've suggested that to Rage before, but he insisted on being naked.
Okay.
So, which I thought would be difficult.
Yeah. I'd imagine that's a lot of hair.
Maintaining focus would be the main point for me.
Just covering a few comments.
Are you picturing that now?
I am, unfortunately. Ladnav challenge, going back to the idea of directional antenna. You can make a good Yagi, directional antenna. Yeah, I've seen those. That's like the PVC tubes and bits of metal like connected up. Good
description. Like it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not far off, to be fair. Drew says, noise discipline, leave the snorers at the base. It's always a good one. Those pesky snorers. Lanav challenge, taking notes on your maps during the day is important, so at night you can refer back. That is a good idea.
Good man, like that.
It's massively important.
You've clearly dealt with maps before, sir.
Yeah, it's almost like some sort of expert.
Almost like some sort of map man.
Yeah, I'm the map man.
Do you remember that? Hilarious. Yeah.
Mark Kettles. One of the reasons I play so many Friday night games at Gunman is to get used to nav and light discipline at night.
Good man.
Oh, yeah. And then Drew, and we'll make a note of this. There's a topic: force multipliers with airsoft. What is there? Radio, MDGs. There's two right there. So I'll make a note of that, Drew, and we will come back to that at a later date because that's a.
I think that's a given at a MilSim, though. I mean, I think you'd be daft not to have comms at a MilSim, purely on the side of just for safety more than anything.
Had you been here 40 minutes sooner, one of the subjects we actually talked about was making a sim more sim in terms of comms blackouts or being jammed or anything like that. So forcing you to try and use alternative methods. Phil was saying he's attending an event.
Yeah, go on.
Where their comms are effectively going to be compromised. So they're looking at alternatives of how they can kind of get around that. And we were talking about mesh-tastic devices and sort of various other, even down to the bottom, like runners and stuff like that to kind of get into that.
Okay. I've never been down for comms jamming myself or compromising comms. Just for the fact that it's more of a fucking ball ache than it's worth. Especially when everything's running sweet and it's like, oh, you've got to change channels now, chaps, because this was compromised. Please input, and it all goes fucking horribly wrong, and everyone gets it wrong, and it's like, now it doesn't work, and now we've jammed ourselves.
Yeah. What group are you on? I'm on group 3. Well, where are you? Group 2. Why are you on group 2? Was that what I thought we were on?
Yeah. Who am I? Why is there taxis talking?
Who are you talking to?
Who ordered an Uber?
Yeah. Drew says you have different style of med provisions depending on scenario. The Afghan asymmetric warfare allows for scab lifter to be in the squad. The peer-to-peer warfare is just a trauma bandage and a jab. Drew says Kaz left behind.
Nice. Remind me to be in a section with you, Drew.
I thought he meant Kaz left behind because he also mentioned just cut to the chase. He's a body bag.
Yeah, well,
he was talking about leaving you, Lance, but I think he meant Kaz left behind for the unit to pick up after the assault or picked up by the next wave.
Oh, I'm glad I can rely on you then in a real situation, Drew. Don't worry, he's bleeding out, but the next lot will pick him up. It should be alive by then still. Yeah, cheers, mate.
There'll be another load long in a minute.
Yeah, it's fine.
Right, the next one we talk about were enemy prisoners and interrogation mechanics. So we have been to a number of events where there are interrogations, and I must say I do enjoy them.
Yeah, a bit too much.
Well, no, more so when the players that are being interrogated kind of play into those characters a bit more. So
does it make you feel more powerful?
Yeah, I just like the control.
So fucking weird. So weird.
No, I meant in terms of I like, we talked earlier about the information gathering aspect of an event and how that intel can give you the opportunity to.
You don't, mate. Honestly, I've seen it. I've witnessed it with my own eyes, and you go all Buffalo Bill on us when there's a chance of interrogating someone. The well gets dug and it rubs its lotion on its skin, or else it gets the hose again. That starts happening, and it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, there are a few situations where we have done some. This sounds bad. I'm not saying we've done horrible things to people, because we haven't generally.
I like the way you're using "we" a lot in this conversation.
Well, there was one time. Do you remember the event that we did with the IEDs?
Trying to forget it.
You and I both bought the probe kits. Remember the probe kits?
Don't say probe. Don't say probe.
No, they were the DDPM
mine extraction kits, personal mine extraction kit. Yeah, there's no mention of probing or exploratory probes or anything like that.
The handheld extraction probe, the thing for prodding the ground in front of you.
Yeah.
It came as like this little handle which looks like a dildo. There's no two ways about it. It looks like a dildo. And you attach extra bits of metal onto it to make it like a pokey stick.
Ugh.
That's basically what that is.
Yeah.
But I remember we had a hostage and we were like, we will do terrible things to you. And getting the handle out, just kind of waving it around, just
I'm running it under the nose.
I mean, I wouldn't do that with an actual dildo, because that would be
disgusting.
There's a line basically between a bit of fun and a bit of banter, and
there is no place for dildos in airsoft.
No.
Or is there? Can you think of one situation where a dildo would be
next week?
would be needed in a MilSim situation?
I don't know, if you're fighting through a brothel, that's the only real reason.
Well, like a bit of background, bit of B-roll.
Yeah.
just vibrating on the shelf.
Something else to avoid slipping on when you run through the room.
Just setting one up and put it in. Just set one up and put it in the bottom of someone's burger. So you're just walking through the woods at night.
Who is not following noise discipline?
Yeah. Yes. Whose pocket pleaser is that, please?
Oh, Jesus.
Silly. Very silly.
Yeah, I mean, I've completely right. So with the interrogation, I like the whole concept of like, talking to people and that interaction with players and stuff. It is quite challenging when you get people that you're interrogating and they're just like, "Nah, I'm not playing this. I'm just not going to tell you anything, mate."
Yeah, I mean, they can choose not to take part in the roleplay side of it, but then they've still got to give up the information, because otherwise that's just a dick move, isn't it?
The whole concept of interrogation seems pointless. But I mean, there could be, you could go down the route of having an SOP for players. Like, if you're caught, maybe
you know what I'd do to make someone feel uncomfortable? I'd sit them in a room, right?
Stare at them.
But I'd paint them. I'd do I'd have an easel set up, and I'd just be.
Yeah, that would make me feel uncomfortable. That's making me feel uncomfortable. We're not even in the room.
Just like that.
Yeah. No, I mean, you could have like a procedure whereby, right,
double dildo used to reduce bleeding from through and through. Maybe. Christ. Yeah, but that'd be like a frothy beverage.
Oh, almost. Jesus! Right, with interrogation, you could have different levels of openness to tell people information based on your character, for example. So it might be right, if you're
like a group session.
Yeah, if you're like no.
Hi, my name is Pedro, and recently divorced from my wife.
If you've been given like a level 1 allocation, it might be that you just give up absolutely everything in the first 5 minutes, with even like the merest threat of, you're going to arrest you forever, you're going to get jailed away or whatever.
Yeah, or what's this bag of drugs we've just found on your pocket?
Well, exactly, yeah. Which, by the way, is a very good interrogation tactic.
Very good interrogation tactic. If you're playing a bent DEA agent, and you've got your own stash of cocaine or simulated drugs, should we say? Yeah. That can find their way into a captive's pocket. That's always good.
Yeah. You don't even need to be a bent DEA agent. It literally just be like, you want to get the information. So
yeah, I think there's got to be an element of not playing by the rules when you're planting drugs on people for your own personal gain.
I'll never forget I can't remember who it was. I think it was Sean Glass. We brought him in at it was the DEA event at APOC. And
he went berserk.
Yeah, we brought him in for interrogation, and it was like, "Oh yeah, I've been searched by the police out there." It's like, no, you're with the DEA now. We're gonna take over this investigation.
Yeah.
So we're like asking him questions and stuff like that. We're like, "Oh, have you been searched?" He's like, "Yeah, they searched me." It's like, "Well, no, we're gonna search you now." I got down to his shoes, and I just pulled out the little bag of drugs that that was like opal fruits or. No, Palmer Violets. That was it.
Palmer Violets, hardcore Palmer Violet plus A++.
We'd found this tiny little bag on someone earlier in the day, and then everyone we searched, if you had probable cause, you could keep them for full 45 minutes in the police station. So everyone we searched, we found drugs on, which gave us that probable cause to arrest them, basically. So we had just almost every Op4 player that we came up against ended up going into prison. I'll never forget his face. He's, "You dirty bastards!"
Yeah, dirty bastards. Drew makes a great point there. I love the sound of that story. Intelligence Corps pulled a blinder in Iraq. They set up 3 mess tents, signed officer, sergeant, and other ranks. The captured enemy filtered themselves at dinner time. "You can't eat with us. Bugger off in there." So yeah. All the squaddies just sat back, and all the sergeants and officers are getting absolutely drilled in the interrogation room. Fair play. Nice.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Like it.
Phil says, so with regards to taking prisoners, how do you handle players who refuse handcuffs under the banner of PTSD, but then attempt escaped because they aren't restrained? Right, this is a game-dependent rule mechanic, and it is something that is important. And if you are running an event whereby you have capture scenarios or anything like that, or restraint systems, restraint mechanisms, i.e., right, if you're a player that has been actively told like a certain phrase, Whoa. And that's all it boils down to. It'll be a case of like, I have removed your weapons, I have removed your
that's what I do.
I've etc. 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 You get through like a little list of things, almost like your Miranda rights. Mm-hmm. Get through that, and then you say, right, you are now captured. It's just a case of that player has to basically be treated as captured. Now, if a player who is doing the arrest hasn't undertaken that full procedure, and it's just as much the players who are being arrested to know it as the players who are arresting, if they miss one off, I haven't captured or deactivated your weapons. They are fair play. They are fair game.
Absolutely. I've always drilled that into people before we've gone out on a patrol. If there's a chance that we're going to be taking enemy captive or hostage, or not hostages, but prisoner, if you like, I've always said to them, make sure if they're wounded and you're going to medic them back in, before you do that, make it clear that they've understood you. And you say, once you're medic back in, I'm going to be taking you as prisoner. Your primary, secondary, pyrotechnics and melee weapons are all disarmed. Your radio communications are all disarmed, and you'll treat your hands as being bound in front of you. Not waving them about this, that, and the other, and that's how you're supposed to stand. Just stand, holding your own wrists. Not going to put zip ties or quick cuffs or anything like that on them. Just hold one of your own wrists. So if they do fall, they can put their hands out and stop themselves. And they've got to play the game. There's that element of honour and respect within the rules of the game, sort of thing. Which I think it's always worked very well. Gunman at Tuddenham, we used that to our advantage as well by bringing guys back to our harbour area, which is down in the woodblock. So yeah, that's always a good method for taking prisoners, rather than having to worry about plastic cuffs and things like that. Yeah,
cuffs and like the actual physical restraints.
I don't like the idea of them myself.
They're not needed.
No,
it's not necessary. We're not playing with real weapons. It's not like you didn't actually shoot me because it's a BB gun. No, we're replicating. We're playing here. This is not. That being said, I have fond memories of when we were pre-COVID. This was a long old time ago. But back when we did the APOC MilSims, where we all basically had like black hood kits, if you remember.
Oh, yes.
This was like black pillowcases, because we would do events whereby you capture some players. We wouldn't necessarily hood them and then lead them around, because that's potentially unsafe. But
no, if they were sat down back at our PB though, I mean, what I bought is I had about 5 or 6 pairs of like the old impact safety goggles, like the big disc cutter goggles, if you like, and just blacked them out with black masking tape, just so they're all blacked out. So you could just put a pair of goggles on them when they're back at your PB, put a pair of the old earmore range earmuffs on them, so their hearings is prevents them from hearing whatever you're talking about. Can't see around your PB, see what's going on. As long as they're comfortable with you doing that, just say, look, you're okay for me to put these blacked out goggles on you and a pair of ear defenders so you can't hear what we're saying, and just sit there and just keep quiet. Do you want some water? Do you want some Haribos? Shush. Otherwise, shush. So, but some people might not want to do that.
It goes down
so,
to the event organizer, doesn't it? Ultimately,
exactly.
Like, if that's a fundamental part of that event, there needs to be a very strict rule set in place because, I've been in all sorts of different situations. I've had fireworks launched at me in lieu of pyrotechnics. These were actual just fucking fireworks, which, okay. It was terrifying and it looked cool from the perspective of I'm at a MilSim. Yeah, there's a real rocket flying towards me. But let's be honest with you, there is an element of it's still a fucking game that we all need to go home safely. And there are
is that not the same as a mortar round going off next to you, though? I mean...
Well, a mortar round is at least... No, it's not the same because a mortar round pyrotechnic is designed to land and then go off on that scenario. A firework is designed to go up in the air, not to be fired at people, go up in the air and then explode and dissipate as a display piece, isn't it?
Mm.
I mean, we're talking like a bottle rocket. Well, not like a bottle rocket, but we're talking like the little kind of rockets that you fire up.
What I'd love to do for like when we just tangent really quickly about the light thing was be able to get the Roman candles that just shoot the one white ball out, but it does like a multi-shot and just drop that in one of the mortar tubes for just sort of like illume rounds at night time.
Oh yeah, that'd be cool.
Because I think that would be awesome, and I've really struggled to actually just find that. Roman candles, I think that's what they're called, Roman candles. Yeah. Like a multi-shot Roman candle that just fires a white light out of it. Boom, boom. That would be quality. I'd love to get hold of some of them.
Yeah. I mean, you could even set it up as almost like a, the trip flares, the British Army trip flares.
Yeah.
If it was done, you'd need to be very careful. Obviously, someone's not standing on it when someone activates it, and then all of a sudden this, what was believed to be a pile of bushes, all of a sudden starts fucking firing fireworks at them. But that would be a cool idea. I like that idea.
Mm.
Yeah. I mean, Phil says, I guess it's about ways to manage the battlefield lawyers. Yeah. I mean, there are ways and means of getting around it. And if someone's going to be a dick about it, I've captured you. If there's no set procedure, that person is captured,
Yeah.
Don't start. And then if they do try and escape, just fucking clock them one. Like, there's no ROE, there's no rules or whatever.
No, exactly.
With a BB gun, not like just slap them around the face or anything like that. I meant just shoot them, which sounds worse than it is. Drew says, moving an individual that is captured and no use of artificial restraints. Have their hands to front with fingers entwined and thumbs up. You grab the thumbs and guide them around. If they try to run, push the thumbs towards their body. They soon stop moving. Oh, sorry, I was just testing that out. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah. That's a good idea. But I mean, ultimately, again, if there's just a rule in place that goes, right, you're captured, just follow this, and then it's easy. You don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
Right, we are getting to the end of the episode. I do just want to cover one last one, which is the idea of, there's a couple, really. There's a few I'd like to mention just quickly, but we won't go into. So, for example, realistic extraction scenarios, obviously with like things like not just Cassavac, but you've got to get VIPs out. You've got extracting under fire using vehicles or boats or anything like that. That's obviously a cool idea. Hidden threats like IEDs, booby traps, ambushes. We've talked a lot before about the idea of minefields, and I think we might start to see, I'm really hoping, because it seems to be a growing trend, the idea of, the little cap gun caps.
Yes, I've seen that, with the claymores.
Yeah, there seems to be a growing thing of like 3D printed devices that are like really thin that you can just leave out on the ground, which protect the cap gun caps, and that ultimately when you tread on them, they go off. So not the most biodegradable, but if we can get cardboard versions,
well, it's like them ones.
That'll be a really cool.
It's like them IEDs that I made for the APOC event, wasn't it? They were literally the alarm mats that you have in old people's homes. If they fall over or fall out of their bed, it's like a posi neggy contacted within the flat mat. Rigging that up to a 20 decibel alarm with a red beacon on it is brilliant. Runs off a little 6-volt battery.
I like the idea of having something cardboard or something like that, like maybe a little metal plate. I don't know how you do it exactly, but then something that you can just literally, you take a big stack of them and go, right, this is a minefield, and you literally lay them out, and then you can forget about them. They'll be there until they biodegrade.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah.
Which, depending on the device, obviously you don't want anything too explosive because you don't want to be creating an actual fucking minefield.
No.
But I can see airsoft sites throughout the country. That would be wicked if instead of just this area is mined, actually mine it.
Yeah, actually put something there tangible.
Yeah. Psychological operations, psyops, and propaganda. So, for example, things like loudspeakers, propaganda leaflets, misinformation broadcasts, psychological tactics that can sway civilian NPCs or influence opposing player decisions, hearts and minds, stuff like that. That's all kind of stuff that builds into those engagements with NPCs and civ pop that you can kind of roll out at an event. Realistic command structures. I mean, I think ultimately, if you go to a MilSim event, there should be, if it's a good MilSim event, there should be a proper command structure in place. But you can have a realistic one. So rather than have the 0 being a member of the DS team or the organisers or anything like that, have an in-game master, have an in-game commander. So that is someone that doesn't know the event. They are there. They are providing that command structure with the information that they're being given, because that makes it a lot more interesting. If you've got someone that runs the event going, I need you at A6 at 6 o'clock, you're like, there's going to be an ambush there. There's something's going to happen at 6 o'clock in that location. Whereas if the commander is being fed back into mail, like, right, we've got a potential drop at 6 o'clock at this location, that can then feed out, but it comes out naturally rather than sort of more of a forced intel drop from the commands of the event structure. But the one I want to talk about lastly is environmental hazards. So, for example, simulated CBRN. So that's your chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear threats. Yeah. So we've talked before about the concept of having Mark 5s with stink bobs or something in them to kind of simulate a proper gas smell or something like that. Mm-hmm. But we've both been to events, Lance, where you've got the full face pro gas masks and stuff like that we've had to fight around in. I think it's important. I think it's a cracking idea for an event. That builds that immersion. Can you think of any specific examples that you've done with that? I mean, I know we did Op Phoenix where we sort of tried to simulate obviously disease.
Yeah. Not such events. I mean, I know I did one. I did have a bit in my one of my events I did at APOC years ago, where each team, there was an area of the AO, once they sort of discovered some coordinates, they had to go to this location, and there was a gridded off area. So if you had an 8-man team, you had a marshal there. One of the guys had to get into a full CBRN suit and the mask and the radioactive gloves. Or whatever they are, gloves, and go inside this cordon zone with the rest of the section doing all round defence, and they had to carry out a series of challenges that was quite sort of mentally challenging as well as sort of physically tangible challenges that were difficult to do with the big gloves on. The masks are steaming up and that, and they had to do that within sort of 10 minutes to get the next part of their map, if you like, to where they had to get to, and it was for Op 4 and Blue 4 to sort of achieve throughout the day. It was a bit of a twist on MilSims, although it was MilSim, there was patrolling, there was everything, run throughout.
Like a MilSim escape room.
There was to put a better word on it, yeah, that's pretty much how you could describe it. It was like another element that they could sort of do, sort of a little bit out of the firefight, if you know what I mean. It wasn't like you're going to get 2 Op 4 sections coming across while you're trying to do this challenge. It was a little bit off the beaten track, purely for that very reason that this team got to go, oh yeah, cool, we've done that challenge, that was wicked. And that sort of worked well. I mean, obviously, we've done events where we've had the old painter's mask, and if you do get yellow gas goes off, you have to chuck on your mask and access a gassed area. So it does work well. I haven't seen it used, prolifically throughout MilSim.
It's not very widespread, is it?
It's not. And again, it's relying on people to have that sort of kit to do it, because otherwise, if you're just there, I mean, it could be a bit. You could get away with wearing a set of white painter's overalls and maybe more of a forensic sort of thing, maybe. Especially like a police event or whatnot, but I don't know about a full CBRN loadout for an event. I think that might be asking a bit too much of players.
Very hot,
very hot, and on top of the kit that you're already carrying around, the last thing you want to have to carry is like a full CBRN suit, and potentially not even fucking use it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I get the mask. I get the mask thing.
Masks,
yeah, 100%. Masks would be good. masks and maybe potentially another pair of gloves. So it's that element of having to change out and put something else on. So you have like a pair of like your CBRN gloves and mask maybe, but like a full suit of that. I don't know. I don't know if people would be too down for that. If I'm honest.
Yeah.
Although I have got a full CBRN suit, that's irrelevant.
Yeah, I'm on board with it. I mean, you obviously don't need to go down the route of like dosing yourself down with like the desiccated earth or whatever afterwards.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah.
Being a little bit overkill.
Yeah, full as earth and fucking iodine or whatever it is, just drinking bottles of iodine. That's it. You get that down, yeah.
Drew says a scenario that I've never seen: loads of sofas and chairs, and the ground is lava.
Yeah, ground is lava. Brilliant.
I'll tell you what. Actually, I was at Leeds Castle this weekend, this last weekend, and they have got an absolute cracking children's play area there now. Which taking my daughter, she was like,
"Oh, she was there for this one, was she?"
Yeah, she was there for that one. I was like, "Oh my god, this would be such a blinding airsoft venue," because like they've got this absolutely. It's probably the largest playground fort structure that I've seen. Like this thing was huge. It's got proper defensible walls and stuff.
Have you never been to Knockhatch?
No.
Oh, you should give Knockhatch a visit. It's down towards it. It's sort of like in between Eastbourne and Uckfield, I want to say, down that way. Yeah, if you want to see a wooden fort play area, go to Knockhatch because that is epic, and it's got a fire-breathing dragon in the middle of it.
Oh, nice.
That's very cool.
I was thinking, like, these game zones that we obviously go to. There's a lot of very well established sites, and they're all comprised of like, pallets and bits of MDF that have gone sort of slowly mouldy on that over time. And then you kind of compare that against Delta Force sites with the, they put a bit more money into their structures and things. So they generally tend to have like the more, setups. Like, where was it we went and did that skirmish day? Because there was like a fort up the back of that. I think that was Dog Tag. Is that Dog Tag?
Yes, there is a fort there. Yeah.
Yeah. So things like that, I was amazed at this huge structure, and that would make an absolute cracking airsoft skirmish site. I mean, whether it'll be CQB or not, I don't know, because obviously got firing down and up and all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Like it wasn't, the walls were obviously not designed for airsoft. It was designed as a children's play area. So it's designed to be able to see your kids and know where they are, rather than like hiding behind barricades and shooting the shit out of people.
Getting the drop on them.
Yeah, but I think that'd be an absolute cracking. Like if children's play centre designers and airsoft sites need to have a little get together and work some stuff out, because I think there's an absolute, blinding idea there.
Airsoft play.
Yeah.
Soft play with airsoft guns.
Yeah. CQB in a soft play arena. That'd be a nice. Yeah.
Oh my god, could you imagine?
But it's not sized for adults, it's still sized for kids.
Yeah, so you're crawling through that tunnel, just getting shot in the arse, so you get the other end of it. It's like, oh! Quality.
Right, that's the end of our SimCity building the ultimate MilSim experience. One thing that we have been working on, we were talking about this last year, we have been working on our MilSim index.
Yes.
We are in the latter stages of getting this tested and kind of rolled out to various people. So if you are interested in kind of having your input on our idea of our MilSim index, we have something that we can send you if you'd be interested to provide commentary and feedback. Similarly, if you are an event organizer, site owner, anybody that kind of gets involved with the concept of organizing MilSims, battle sims, anything like that, please do get in touch. It'd be cracking to have a chat with you because we're trying to get as much feedback from kind of event organisers early doors so that we can roll that out into the first issue, at which point, we're hoping this becomes an actual usable and tangible thing to allow MilSims to be scored. And when we say scored, we don't mean in terms of like F, you fucking failed.
That's very Australian. God, it sounded like Phil then.
I don't know why I went Australian on that one. That was very strange.
Fucking failed.
But we're not looking at it from the perspective of it's a shit MilSim, it's a shit event. But what we're trying to do is give players the ability to work out how extreme an event is. We all talk about hardcore MilSims, we talk about hard routine, we talk about the difference between MilSims, battle sims, skirmish days, etc., etc. And the idea of this is that it will allow players to categorize events beforehand, so they can ask other players that, could you fill this out? What kind of event is it? Event organisers can actually advertise that. So if they've got different factions, it might be that it's currently out of 68. I've got to change that because the scoring's a bit wank.
Wank.
No, it is, because 68 is a shit number. You can't go, oh, it's 68. Well, is that good or bad? Because that already
It's
sounds
got to be
like
69 then, isn't it? Surely.
Yeah.
Must be able to shoehorn in one more point. Come on.
Yeah, we'll squeeze it in. I want to try and get it to a round number. But basically, the idea is that, you can go, right, this faction is like an A grade, because that sounds like it's being scored.
Fucking dingoes.
Fucking dingoes. The idea is that, you can look at 3 factions at an event. One's going to be the easiest. 4's going to be the hardest. So you go, right, okay, I'm probably about a 1. And then you can see the grading breakdown for that as well. So it allows you to pack and it allows you to kind of see what you might be getting up to without kind of potentially giving too much away early doors or anything like that, the event. So, Drew, I'll send it to you. If anybody else, let me know. And we'll
Welcome, Dan Guest. Just wants to say I'm late and he blames Guinness and poker. I'm sure we can let you off for that one, as long as Guinness and poker is involved.
Maybe. Last thing, so if you want to get in touch, you can do so on email at nofochat@hotmail.com. Our Instagram is at November_Foxtrot_NoFo, and the website is novemberfoxtrot.co.uk. I fumbled that middle one.
You did, yeah.
November_Foxtrot_NoFo. Our Instagram. You can also get in touch with us on our own individual Instagrams of at 9volt Airsoft, at @callsign_Quartermaster for Andy, and at the _punish_1_ for Lance. We are joined next week. I think we have a guest on. I apologise. I should have checked this before starting to talk.
I think, is it Hades reschedule? Or we could double check that, but I'm pretty sure it was.
Possibly. Oh, no, we haven't actually got anything allocated for next week.
Oh, well, I'll jump on to...
if you have a chat with Hades. In 2 weeks' time, we're going to be joined by Viraj Airsoft. He's going to be talking about airsoft across Europe, which should be interesting. We've not kind of looked into that aspect before. So join us for that one.
Yes.
But in the meantime, that's pretty much it. So have an absolutely cracking week. If you've got any closing words, Lance, I'll let you have the closing words. Closing words.
I was trying to think of something sporadic and no, I can't think of anything. Other than, if you are going to any events this weekend, have a wonderful time. Take your hits. Don't be a dick. And throw yourself into the event 100%. And you'll get an awful lot out of it. So,
there we go.
There we go.
Nice one. On that note, have an absolutely excellent week. We shall see you next week. Wednesday, 8 o'clock.
Absolutely. Hopefully 8 o'clock and not 8:40. We'll see.
Say goodbye, guys.
Goodbye, guys.
We'll see you
later. Bella. Stay NoFo.
Have a good one. Bye.
Oh, yes. It rubs the lotion on its skin or else it gets the hose again.
I think that went quite well, actually.